The sky burned red as the human ship crashed through the atmosphere of an unknown planet. Captain Elias Gray held the controls tightly, trying to keep the ship from breaking apart. "System failure," the AI repeated. "Crash landing in progress." The last thing Elias saw before blacking out was a thick forest rushing toward him. Hours later, Elias opened his eyes, lying in soft grass surrounded by tall glowing trees. His body ached, and smoke still rose from the broken remains of his ship nearby. He stood up slowly, scanning the area for danger. Strange bird-like sounds echoed in the distance, but the forest was quiet, too quiet. Elias reached for his blaster, but it was gone. He checked his wrist device. It was dead. With no signal and no weapon, he knew he had to find help, shelter, or both. But he didn't know this planet, and he had no idea what lived here. As he moved through the forest, he noticed something strange. The trees whispered not with wind, but with voices. It sounded like soft singing, like a lullaby from his childhood. He followed the sound, curious and cautious. Then he saw her. A figure stood by a tree, glowing faintly with silver light. She had long white hair, eyes like green crystal, and ears that curved like leaves. Her skin shimmered, not like metal, but like moonlight. Elias froze, unsure if she was real or some kind of ghost. She looked at him calmly and then smiled. "You have arrived," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Who are you?" Elias asked, slowly raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "My name is Elira," she replied, "and you are the one we have waited for." Elias blinked, confused. "Waited for? What do you mean?" Elira stepped forward, the forest light bending gently around her. "Our world is dying," she said, "and only you can give it life again." He frowned, thinking she meant technology or medicine. "I'm a soldier, not a healer," he said. She shook her head. "We need a son, a strong one." He stared at her, unsure if he heard correctly. "Our race is fading," Elira continued. "The old blood grows weak. The magic sleeps. But inside you, there is something rare: human strength, human fire. You are the last piece of an ancient promise. Only a human can awaken the new age." Elias couldn't believe what he was hearing. He thought this was just another survival mission. Now he was part of some ancient elf prophecy. It sounded insane, but something about her words felt real. Before he could speak, the ground shook. A deep roar echoed through the forest. Elira's smile vanished, and fear appeared in her eyes. "They found us," she whispered. "Who?" Elias asked, stepping closer, but Elira didn't answer. She held out her hand, and for a second, he saw symbols glow across her skin. She touched his chest, and a spark of light entered him. "Find me again," she said, "in the heart of the forest." Then she vanished in a flash of silver light. Like mist in the morning, Elias stood there, breathless and confused. Then came the growl. Dark shapes moved between the trees, tall and twisted. Creatures made of metal and shadow, with glowing red eyes. Elias ran, dodging trees and leaping over roots. He had no weapon, no help, and no clue what was going on. He reached a cave and crawled inside, heart pounding. The creatures sniffed outside, but did not enter. After minutes of silence, he collapsed against the cave wall. "What the hell is this place?" he muttered. In the quiet, he remembered Elira's words. A son, a prophecy, and a dying race. He didn't believe in magic, but he had seen her, felt her touch, heard her voice, and now something was inside him, something glowing and strange. Maybe he had survived the crash for a reason. Maybe fate had brought him here. But one thing was certain. This mission was far from over. The air inside the cave felt colder than before. Like it remembered something older than time. Elias opened his eyes slowly, unsure if he had slept or fallen into a dream. His body still ached from the crash. But something was different. The cave walls now glowed with soft blue veins, like light running through stone. A soft hum filled the space, not from outside, but inside his chest. He touched his heart, and the symbol Alira had marked him with burned faintly. It pulsed with life, as if calling to something deep within the forest. He stood up and stepped outside, drawn forward by a pull he didn't understand. Forest was no longer silent. Tiny lights floated in the air like living fireflies, whispering in a language he couldn't hear. Trees moved gently, as if parting just for him. Birds with crystal feathers flew above, watching with curious eyes. He walked for hours, guided not by sight, but by instinct, until the forest opened into a vast clearing and what he saw took his breath away. A hidden village, built high in the trees and across routes the size of houses. Glowing bridges connected wooden homes shaped like petals and shells. Elves walked silently, their robes flowing like wind. They stopped as Ilila stepped into view, every eye locking on him at once. Guards aimed curved bows at him, their arrows humming with blue energy, but before they fired, a familiar voice spoke, calm and strong. "Lower your weapons," Alira said, appearing from a vine-covered path. "He is the one I chose." The guards hesitated, but obeyed. Alira walked up to Elias, her eyes filled with something between relief and sadness. "You found your way," she said softly. "I didn't really choose," Elias replied. "Something brought me here," she nodded, then turned to the others. "Prepare the circle of memory." Elias looked around, feeling the tension in the air. The elves didn't trust him, and he didn't blame them. He was an outsider, and they were clearly protecting something sacred. That night, around a great silver tree at the center of the village, the ritual began. Elias sat in the middle, surrounded by glowing symbols carved into the earth. Alira placed her hand on his shoulder, and a rush of images filled his mind. He saw a past he had never lived, wars between elves and machines. He saw old humans fighting beside elves, forming an alliance that was later broken. He saw a prophecy written in flame and song. "One shall come from the stars, holding fire in his blood and peace in his bones." Elias gasped as the vision ended. Alira looked at him, serious and calm. "You are the last echo of that promise." "I'm just a man," he whispered. "I'm not a savior, but you are human," she said, "and that is what we need most." She explained how her race was slowly fading. The magic of the land grew weaker each year. No new children had been born in decades. The bloodlines were too pure, too fragile. "But human blood is chaos," she said. "It creates strength through struggle. A child born of elf and human could restore the balance." "A son," Elias said quietly. "That's why you want me." "Yes," she replied. "Not for power, but for survival." Before he could answer, a horn sounded in the distance. Sharp and unnatural, the elves looked to the sky with fear. A metal bird drone flew overhead. Scanning the village, it let out a red pulse and then sped off into the clouds. "They've found us," one elder whispered. Elias clenched his fists. "The same machines that attacked me." Alira nodded. "They want what little magic we have left, and they will come soon." She looked into his eyes. "I won't force you to stay, but if you walk away now, this village won't survive the next storm." Elias felt the weight of her words settle into his chest. He was no hero, but maybe, just maybe, he could be something more. As the elves prepared for war, Elias stood silently under the silver tree. He didn't know the rules of this world or its ancient magic, but deep inside, he felt a new fire awakening, and somewhere, in a future not yet written, a child waited to be born. The forest was silent, but Elias could hear his own heartbeat. Louder than war drums, he stood at the edge of a black river that didn't reflect the sky. Behind him, the elf village had vanished, swallowed by mist and memory. Ahead of him, the trial of the ancients waited, hidden deep inside the whispering caves. "No one comes out unchanged," Alira had told him, her voice calm but heavy. "You won't face monsters outside, you'll face the ones inside you." Elias didn't fully understand, but he stepped forward anyway. He had seen too much, felt too much, to turn back now. The cave swallowed the light as he entered. The air grew cold, wet, and thick, like breathing through water. Each step echoed louder than it should have, and the glowing mark on his chest began to flicker like a dying flame. Suddenly he was no longer alone. Shadows moved around him, not like animals but like memories. He saw a younger version of himself, hiding behind a burning house. Screams filled the air. His mother, his brother, his childhood gone in one night. "You left them," a voice whispered. Elias turned, breathing hard. "That wasn't my fault." The shadow stepped closer. It looked like him, but the eyes were hollow. "You survive and they die just like always," it said, smiling without joy. Elias swung his fist, but the shadow vanished. Then a second vision appeared, a battlefield. On Earth, bodies of fellow soldiers scattered across broken ground. His commander's voice in his ear, "Abort the mission." But Elias had disobeyed. Believing he could save everyone, he had failed. Now the commander's ghost stood before him, eyes full of judgment. "You always think you're the hero," the ghost said, "but your choices bring death." Elias dropped to his knees, the weight of guilt crushing him. But then he remembered Alira, her voice, her touch, the look in her eyes when she said, "We believe in you." He clenched his fists, stood up, and shouted into the darkness, "I'm not perfect, but I won't run from who I am." A blast of light exploded from his chest, clearing the shadows away. In their place stood a single figure, an old elf warrior in silver armor. His eyes glowed with wisdom and sorrow. "You have passed the first trial," he said, "but courage is not enough." He raised a long, ancient staff and struck the ground. The cave floor cracked open, and Elias fell down into a pool of black water. He sank deeper and deeper, until his lungs screamed for air. Then light, warmth, and silence. He opened his eyes, and he was no longer in the cave. He stood in a field of stars, weightless, surrounded by floating memory fragments. Each memory showed a possible future. In one, he walked away back to Earth, alone, old, forgotten. In another, he stood beside Alira, holding the hand of a child with glowing eyes. The child looked up and whispered, "Will you choose us?" Elias reached out, and the memory shattered. He landed back in the cave, gasping for air. Covered in glowing moss, the elf warrior stood before him once more, holding something in his hands, a blade not metal, but made of living light and crystal. "This is not a weapon," the warrior said. "It is a reminder." "Of what?" Elias asked. "That true strength is born from sacrifice." The warrior pressed the blade into Elias's hands, then slowly faded into mist, leaving behind only the echo of his words. Elias stepped out of the cave as the sun began to rise. The elves waited at the edge of the forest, silent and still. When they saw him holding the blade, they bowed. He had passed the trial, not just with strength, but with truth. Alira stepped forward, her eyes wide with something deeper than pride. "You faced your past," she said. "And I saw my future," Elias replied quietly, "one that only exists." "If I stay," she nodded, then touched his chest where the mark now burned brighter. "You are now bound to this land," she said, "and it to you." The trees rustled above them, carrying his name on the wind. The trial was over, but the real war had only just begun. The sky cracked open like glass. A streak of silver fire shot across the clouds, vanishing into the horizon. Elias stood on the forest cliff, watching, breath held, heart pounding. That was no shooting star, it was a signal, and it had answered his distress call he had sent it hours ago, using a hidden transmitter from the crashed ship. Now someone or something was coming, maybe help, maybe death. Alira appeared beside him, her cloak fluttering in the wind. "That light doesn't belong to this world," she said. "No," Elias replied. "It belongs to mine, below them." The elf village prepared in silence. Guards tightened their armor. Elders whispered warnings. Children were hidden beneath roots. The machines had found them before, but this was different. This wasn't an attack, not yet. It was a message. Hours passed, and night fell. Then came the sound, low humming. Metallic wings cutting through the trees. A ship landed just beyond the valley edge. Smooth, silver, glowing blue. Elias walked forward alone, heart steady, blade of light at his side. The door opened, and a familiar voice echoed across the valley. "Captain Elias Gray, you are ordered to return to human command." Elias blinked, shocked. Standing at the ship's door was Commander Vale, his old superior. "You're alive," Elias said, stunned. "Barely," Vale replied. "We tracked your signal, it led us here." But his eyes scanned the forest behind Elias. "You've made contact with the natives," he added coldly. "They're not natives." Elias said, "They saved me." Vale stepped forward, armor gleaming under the moonlight. "And what did they ask in return?" he said, voice sharp. Elias didn't answer. Vale narrowed his eyes. "They want something from you, don't they?" "They want to live," Elias said softly. "And maybe I do too," behind Elias. Alira stepped into view. Vale's hand went to his blaster. But Elias raised his own. "Don't," he warned. "She's under my protection." Vale's tone darkened. "You don't belong to them, Captain. You're human, our responsibility. Our soldier." "No," Elias said, voice hard now. "I'm more than that. And this planet, these people, they're more than targets." Vale looked at Alira with cold curiosity. "You're the one who asked for a child," he said. Alira didn't flinch. "Yes," she replied, "but not for power, for peace." Vale laughed. "Peace with magic and monsters?" "Don't be naive," he pointed toward the sky. "A full fleet waits above, ready to cleanse this place." Elias stepped forward. "Stand down, Commander. If you fire on this world, you'll answer to me." Vale raised an eyebrow. "You'd betray your own kind for her?" Elias didn't blink. "I'm not betraying anyone. I'm protecting the only future that makes sense." The wind shifted, and the forest glowed with silent power. The trees seemed to lean closer, listening. From within the shadows, the elf council emerged, and the stars above dimmed. As if bracing for what came next, Alira walked toward Elias and placed a hand on his chest. "I didn't tell you everything," she whispered. Elias turned to her. "What do you mean?" "I've seen your world before," she said. He stared, confused. "I crossed into Earth long ago, only for a moment," she explained. "And I saw you as a boy, protecting the tree that others tried to burn. That moment, it echoed across time. You were chosen then, not by fate, but by the forest itself." Elias remembered that day. It was long buried, forgotten, but real. Vale listened silently, then spoke again. "You've been watched, manipulated," he snapped. "She chose you like breeding stock." Alira's eyes burned with magic. "I chose him because he chooses to care, even when it's hard. Because his heart still burns. When others turn cold." The ship above them hummed louder, a warning signal. Vale raised a hand to his ear. "They're getting ready, Elias. Last chance." Elias stepped back, placing himself between the ship and the forest. "No," he said. "You've had your chance. Now it's ours." The moon tree had not bloomed in 100 years. Now it pulsed with soft silver light, petals unfolding like breath. Elias stood at its roots, watching as the ground shimmered with magic. This was not a battlefield, not a command center. It was sacred, and he was about to step into something far older than war. Alira stood before him, her robe flowing like water. Around them, the village held its breath. Even the stars above had grown still. "The bond must begin tonight," she said gently, "or the bloodline will fade forever." Elias felt heat in his chest, not pain, but something waking up, something wild, deep, and ancient. He looked into her eyes and saw a question, not a demand. "Are you sure?" he asked. Alira nodded slowly. "This isn't just for me, or for you," she whispered. "It's for a future that may never come unless we choose it now." He took her hand, and the moon tree responded. A beam of silver light wrapped around them. Symbols glowed on their skin. Ancient and alive, Elias's vision blurred, not from pain but from power. The bond ritual had begun, not a ritual of words, but of energy, breath, and memory. He saw flashes her childhood, her training, the moment she watched him as a boy. Moments he never lived, but now felt as if they were his own. She saw his grief, his failures, his strength in silence. Their spirits touched, then merged. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was something deeper, trust. But then the wind screamed. A red light cut through the forest like a wound. The machine empire had returned, early, violent, merciless. Metal shadows moved at the edge of the clearing, scanning, targeting, advancing. Not now, Alira whispered. But her power flickered. The bond was incomplete. Elias reached for his blade, but it shattered in his hand. The ritual had drawn his strength, and now he stood bare. The machines stepped into the clearing, weapons humming. One of them, taller than the rest, spoke. Hybrid detected. Ritual interference engaged. Its arm turned into a cannon. Alira pushed Elias behind her, her eyes burning with fading magic. I'm not letting them take you, she said. Elias stepped forward, weak but burning with rage. No, he said. We finish this together. He closed his eyes, focused. On the bond, not on power, but on connection. Alira's hand found his again. And this time it locked. The forest responded. Roots rose from the ground, forming a barrier around them. The moon tree's light exploded upward. The machine cannon fired, and the blast dissolved before it could touch them. A wave of force threw the machine's back. Elias gasped and dropped. To one knee, he could feel it now, the bond, living inside him like fire in his veins. The remaining machines retreated, crawling back into the trees, but Elias didn't chase them. He turned to Alira, who had fallen to the ground. Her breath shallow, her skin dim. No, he whispered, cradling her. The bond had saved them, but not completed itself. Her spirit flickered like a dying flame. You gave too much, he said, voice shaking. Alira opened her eyes, barely. There's one place left, she whispered. The Forbidden Springs. Where magic is born. Only there. Can the bond be healed? Elias looked toward the northern mountains, his body bruised, his mind spinning. But he stood, lifting her gently into his arms. I'm not losing you now, he said. Not after everything. As he walked into the night, carrying the last hope of two worlds, the moon tree dropped a single silver petal. It floated slowly to the ground, and where it landed, the earth glowed softly. Asterisk time no longer moved in straight lines. The sky was violet, the ground was soft and glowing. Elias didn't know how many days had passed since he entered the northern lands. All he knew was this. Alira was fading, and the last hope of her people was slipping away. He carried her through fog and flame, through forests that whispered, and rivers that glowed. The path to the Forbidden Springs was not marked by roads, but by memories. Each step, a vision. Each breath, a test. One moment, he saw his childhood home, broken and burning. The next, he stood in a field of stars, holding a child that looked like him, and yet not. The child smiled and said nothing, but placed a hand over Elias's heart. He woke up kneeling beside a black pool, still holding Alira, who barely breathed. They had reached the edge of the Forbidden Springs, but there was no spring, no water, only silence. He cried out, "Please help her." The forest did not answer. Then the ground beneath him shifted, and a voice rose from the deep, not loud, but endless, like it had been speaking for centuries. Why do you seek life, human? Elias looked up, and a figure appeared before him. Neither man nor elf, neither machine nor spirit. It wore a robe of starlight, and its face was covered by roots and gears. I don't want power, Elias said. I just want to save her. Would you trade your return home for her breath? Yes. Would you trade your future for hers? Yes. Would you let go of everything you were so something new may be born? Yes, Elias whispered. Without question. The figure raised a hand, and the earth split open. A pool of golden light spilled upward like a waterfall in reverse. Elias stepped in, carrying Alira. Her body began to glow, soft at first, then brighter than the stars above. He felt his blood change. His bones stretch, his heart slow down, not in pain but in transformation. The magic of the Forbidden Springs wasn't about healing wounds. It was about rewriting the soul. Alira opened her eyes slowly, and for the first time, they glowed gold. Instead of green, she gasped, then clutched her stomach. A new light was growing inside her, warm, fierce, alive, the bond. It worked, she whispered, tears falling from her eyes. The spirit figure looked down at them. The child will not be like you. It said, he will be more of both bloods, of both worlds, and he will be hunted, feared, and needed. Elias nodded. Then I'll protect him, always. Alira touched Elias's face. You gave up your world. For hours, she said, voice full of wonder. I didn't lose a world, he said. I found one. But the light faded quickly. Above the trees, smoke began to rise, dark, fast, spreading. The machine fleet had landed. They weren't just hunting now, they were erasing. The Forbidden Springs began to crumble. The spirit whispered, Go, protector, your fight is not finished. Elias held Alira's hand and ran. Behind them, the sacred place of rebirth vanished into the earth. Once more, they returned to the elf village, only to find it under siege. Flames rose from the treetops. Elves fought bravely, but were overwhelmed. Alira stood tall, magic crackling at her fingertips, her belly glowing softly. She raised her arms, and the Theo trees themselves moved to shield the children. Elias charged into the chaos, stronger than before. He didn't need a weapon. His hands burned with raw energy. Each punch shattered metal. Each step shook the ground. The machines began to fall. Back not from fear, but from confusion. This is not possible, one of them said. He is changing. Another responded, and they were right. Elias was no longer just human. He was something new. A bridge between two dying worlds. And now he had something worth protecting more than anything else. Alira appeared beside him, her eyes blazing like suns. The child is near, she said. But he is coming early. Elias turned to her, shocked. In the middle of battle? Yes, she whispered. He chooses now. A sudden light burst from her, and the machines froze in place. The forest grew silent again, and every living creature held its breath. The world paused. Time bent in silence as a single cry echoed through the burning forest. Not a cry of pain, not of fear, but of birth. A new life had entered a dying world, and everything felt it. The wind changed, the trees straightened, even. The machines hesitated, scanning the air like they sensed something had broken free from the old order. And deep in the roots of the moon tree, the child opened his eyes. Alira collapsed into Elias's arms, tears on her face, laughter in her breath. He's here, she whispered. He came early, but he is strong. Elias looked down at the newborn boy, his skin glowing faintly, eyes wide, not blue, not green, but gold. The boy reached out, and as his fingers curled, something impossible happened. The nearest machine dropped its weapon and powered down. Without touching it, without saying a word, the child had sent a wave of energy, pure, instinctive, and full of peace. He doesn't fight with rage, Alira said, smiling. Through exhaustion, he calms with presence. But not all machines could be tamed by peace. From the sky, a massive warship descended, covered in weapons and drones. A cold voice echoed from its speakers. Target identified, hybrid detected, initiate full elimination protocol. Hundreds of metal soldiers dropped from the clouds like falling stars. The forest shook, elves scattered, and the final war began. Elias rose slowly, placing the child in Alira's arms. Protect him, he said. I'll hold the line. Alira tried to stop him. You are not a god. Elias turned back with fire in his eyes. No, but I'm his father. He stood in the center of the battlefield alone. Machines charged, but the ground responded to his presence. Roots erupted, wrapping around their legs. Lightning struck from a sky that now followed Elias's will. Each movement was guided by memory and purpose. He fought. Not to kill, but to protect. not for glory, but for a future still being written. The machines tried adapting, shifting tactics, but they were not prepared for a creature born from two bloodlines. Meanwhile, deep within the tree, the child reached out again. Alira felt the magic building inside him. A soft glow spread through the ground like golden rivers. Elves who had lost their magic suddenly felt it return. Elders rose, warriors awakened. Even the ancient spirits in the forest joined the fight. It was not just Elias versus machines anymore. It was life versus extinction. And life had found its protector. The lid machine, taller than the others, more armored, marched through. Fire and ruin. It raised a weapon the size of a tower, aiming it at the moon tree. Alira stood to block it, arms trembling. But she wasn't alone. Elias appeared in front of her, bloodied but unbroken. The machine fired, and Elias caught the beam with his bare hands. For a second, just 1 second, he was light. A blinding pulse exploded outward. Not of destruction, but of change. The machines froze, glitched, then dropped to their knees. Their programming overwritten by something they didn't understand. Compassion. When the light faded, the battlefield was silent. Smoke rose, but no more gunfire came. The machines had stopped, not because they were broken, but because they had been healed. The child cooed softly, eyes blinking. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He simply looked at the world, and it listened. Elias fell to his knees, exhausted. Alira rushed to him, holding both her warrior and her son. "It's over," she said, tears streaming down her face. "No," Elias whispered, smiling. "It's just beginning." The elves gathered around, not just to celebrate, but to witness the start of a new age. One where magic and man didn't have to be enemies. One where two broken worlds had chosen to build something together. Years later, the child would grow strong, taller than most, wiser than all. And when people asked him where he came from, he would say, "I am the son of peace, born from war." The dream of an elf and a human who believed in something bigger than themselves.